Hi, everyone. I'm Pat McGrew, McGrewGroup, and I am here today with my very good friend, Ryan McAbee, who, while he was at Keypoint Intelligence, authored a really fabulous white paper on behalf of the team at Solimar that is called Optimization, the Better Way to Boost Print Shop Performance. And we wanted to bring you some of the key insights from that white paper. It's based on some work that you heard us talk about really over most of the last year as we were starting to test how Ready PDF, the PDF optimization tool from Solimar, could impact and bring value, I think, in the end, to a print service provider. So, Ryan, thanks so much for taking time to spend a little bit of your time, your effort, and your insights to bring more information to the folks who are listening to us. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. It's always a pleasure to be here, talk with you at any point, and obviously highlight some of the great information and findings and really like real world type results that we found with Ready PDF during some of our lab testing and other details that we'll get into here.
One of the things that happens when you bring a new product to market is you always think you know how it's going to work, and you think you know what the value proposition is going to be. And over the last year, we've learned so much about Ready PDF that wasn't exactly what we originally thought was going to happen. And Keypoint Intelligence, the lab team, was really instrumental in helping us identify a lot of the interesting things around how Ready PDF can play in a print shop. We wanted to first explore a really key question. We're talking about Ready PDF as an optimization tool. We need workflow optimization. Isn't everything already really automated and perfect out there in the real world?
Well, we all love to think that everything is just automated as can be, and you drop a file into one place on the front end, and then it magically appears as the printed output on the other end. But in reality, workflow is not linear. It's very two steps forward, one step back in many cases, and so the thing that's really been changing over the probably last decade, really. And we think it's just only going to increase as we look, kind of put on our analyst hat, is that the nature of how the work comes in, the nature of what that work looks like, it's changing, and it's putting even more pressure on print service providers of really all types across the board. And what I mean by that is that, generally speaking, they're having to deal with more jobs, and those jobs necessarily aren't larger jobs. In many cases, they're often smaller jobs, meaning fewer pages to actually print. But that brings up an interesting conundrum, right? Because our workflows necessarily haven't really evolved rapidly enough to take care of those small jobs. So what it means is that we still have those same touch points. That's the same kind of heavy lifting aspect to onboard the job, to process the job, to make sure it can run correctly on the whatever they output, the press or the printer in the end. We haven't really optimized any of that process to be adapted for these small jobs. And that's really where some of the challenge lies.
So I thought that workflow optimization was going to be the natural result of everybody putting web to print systems in. Did that not actually happen?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up web to print, Pat, because obviously that's a topic we've researched for years over at Keypoint. And what we still find, believe it or not, is a couple of interesting things. Number one, it's that adoption is not across the board. So we don't have really high adoption in web to print from the print service provider aspect. And that's even more true once you get to the smaller, as you go down the scale from large to small kind of print operation. With that said, though, even the people that do have them, they're often not spreading that out, that capability of ordering online to all of their customer base. They kind of concentrate on kind of like maybe their top 3 clients and really try and get them on board with the online ordering process to web to print. So there's a couple of challenges there. But the other challenge in terms of like optimization and workflow is that you're have many different types of PDFs or files that are coming in general that the customer is often uploading, right? Or if they're not, if they're doing template-based design where they're just editing some features or whatever, you're still dependent on whatever kind of file creator that is attached to the web to print to submit quality files. And we know that there's as many colors and of Skittles and rainbows as there are in the world. That's how many flavors of different types and quality of PDF files and general files in general there are.
So when we talk about optimization, that it's different for every segment that you work in, right? I mean, if you're a transaction printer, the challenges you're fighting are a bit different than the challenges than, say, a commercial printer or a book printer are fighting. And as Keypoint was doing its testing, part of the challenge was trying to come up with different kinds of files and seeing how they reacted. But I think across the board, we found that optimization actually brought value to the end-to-end workflow.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, most of our testing in the lab centered around kind of what we would classify traditionally as kind of mid-level production cut sheet type devices. But what we know and what we've learned, obviously, it's with Solimar and other kind of avenues of real life examples, is that there is value across the board. But you're right, the needs and the types of applications vary. So if you're a transactional printer, one of the key concerns these days is making sure that whatever is emitting or creating that file is going to be reliable once it hits the digital front end or the DFE. The other thing in a transactional or direct mail type environment is the fact that you're dealing with, you could be dealing with a large amount of data just because you might be doing variable data printing. It's likely that you are in those kind of applications.
Yeah.
And so that creates even more burden to process and really get the throughput at the digital front end. So anything you can do upstream to optimize that file to basically get it as lightweight as possible, the better off you're going to be. Now, that still applies, some of the benefits still apply to other types of printers. So commercial printers, it's also about quality and throughput. They have some of the same concerns. Obviously, some commercial printers also do direct mail or some other variable data kind of applications. And then if we go kind of even a little bit further out with like wide format signage shops, they can see some uplift here too, because they may not be dealing with the sheer number of jobs to have to print. But what's interesting in that particular arena is that the files that they're working with are often much larger. So you can have a lot more benefit on a per file basis. And then the other thing is that the rips on that end may not be as robust as the ones that we typically find in the other segments. So it's just helping and giving that kind of digital front end, a rip, as they often call it in wide format, another leg up to be able to handle the work.
So when we start trying to bring is optimization a requirement in workflow, when we try to bring that home, I guess the answer is that optimization does bring value to the workflow from a number of different vectors. It not only helps you create a smaller file in many cases that can improve your network bandwidth, but it also helps you get to your digital front end with a file that will be processed as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of value adds. I mean, and instead of small, probably the terminology I've kind of settled on that I like to say is lightweight, because it's not necessarily always about having the smallest possible file size in terms of kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, that kind of thing. Oftentimes, it's even just reducing the complexity, like maybe simplifying X objects, subsetting fonts, whatever the technique is to optimize, that when it gets to the DFE, even though it may not be a smaller file size, it may be able to process it more easily, even because it's just lightweight or optimized.
All right, so that helps us understand why we need workflow optimization.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate that help.